I always thought I had it all figured out, a good job, a wife, and a steady, predictable life. I guess that's the funny thing about being so sure of something, it makes it all the more shocking when it crumbles. That's where I found myself just a few days ago, standing in the wreckage of what I thought was my marriage to Sarah. Sarah and I have been together for about 12 years, married for 7. It wasn't a perfect marriage, no marriage is, but it worked. Or so I thought. We had our share of disagreements, but we always made up. I work in tech and pull long hours, but I always made time for us. I thought Sarah appreciated that. I thought she appreciated me. Turns out, I was way off the mark. Things started to change about a month ago. We'd just gotten back from a weekend getaway, our attempt to reconnect, or whatever Sarah called it. I thought the trip went well. We drank wine, had some decent sex, better than it had been in months, and I figured we were finally out of the rut we had been in. But then something shifted. She started to get more distant, more defensive over little things. If I asked her how her day was, she'd snap that she didn't need to tell me every detail. If I tried to make plans, she'd suddenly have a reason why it wouldn't work, some made-up work meeting or a girls' night that I wasn't invited to. And that's when I noticed her phone. It was glued to her hand, but she never had it unlocked when I was around. Not that I'm the snooping type. At least, I wasn't. It didn't happen all at once. In fact, it was a series of small moments that piled up into this looming sense of dread. I could feel something was wrong, but I didn't want to say it. I kept telling myself, "You're overthinking it. She's stressed from work, or maybe she's just going through something." I didn't want to believe that there was someone else. But deep down, I knew. One night, about 2 weeks ago, we were sitting on the couch, watching TV. Sarah was scrolling through her phone, as usual, while I half paid attention to the show. Out of nowhere, her phone lit up with a message. I couldn't help but glance at the screen, it was right in front of me. The message was from some guy named Rob. It wasn't a work text either. He had sent her a heart emoji. Now, I don't know about you, but I've never sent a heart emoji to someone I wasn't interested in. My stomach dropped. But instead of confronting her right then, like any sane man would, I just sat there. I let the moment pass. Maybe I was scared of what I'd hear, or maybe I was still in denial. Whatever it was, I didn't ask, and she didn't offer an explanation. That should have been a red flag right there, but I tried to brush it off as nothing. A few days later, I noticed she was getting dressed up for work in a way she hadn't done in years. We're talking makeup, perfume, a skirt that hugged her curves a little too well. At first, I thought she was just trying to shake up her routine, but then I realized something else. She was leaving early and coming home late, and when I asked why, she said her new boss had her working extra hours. I didn't think much of it at the time, her job had always been demanding, but something about the way she said it felt off. I tried to talk to her about it, about us, but every conversation led to a fight. She'd accuse me of being paranoid, of not trusting her, and I'd back down, telling myself I was imagining things. But the more I watched her, the more distant she became, and the more suspicious I got. Little things kept adding up, the late nights, the unexplained absences, the way she'd pull away from me when I tried to touch her. But it wasn't until last night that everything came crashing down. I was home alone, doing laundry, when her phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. It was face up, and I could see the notification clear as day. "Can't wait to see you tonight, babe." I felt my heart stop for a second. My hands froze mid-fold, and I just stared at that screen like it was some kind of bomb. Sarah was in the shower, so I had a few minutes to figure out how to handle this. I did what any desperate husband would do, I unlocked her phone. We'd never had passwords between us before, and I knew hers from back when we were still close. I opened her messages, and there it was, dozens of texts between her and this guy. Rob. I scrolled through them, feeling the bile rise in my throat. He wasn't just some random work colleague. This had been going on for months. There were messages about how much they missed each other, how great their last night together was, and how they couldn't wait for the next one. And the pictures. I'll never be able to get those images out of my head. The selfies of them together, at a bar, at a hotel, and worse, pictures of her wearing lingerie I'd never even seen before. It was like a gut punch, each photo slicing deeper than the last. I could hear the water shutting off, and panic set in. I quickly closed her phone and put it back on the counter, trying to compose myself, but my mind was racing. What was I going to do? How could I face her after seeing that? And more importantly, how the hell did I not see this coming sooner? I had spent the last few years of my life working to build something with her. And in return? She had been screwing some other guy behind my back, sending him the pictures I thought were just for me. Every memory of us together suddenly felt like a lie. Every smile, every kiss, every moment of intimacy, it all crumbled under the weight of what I had just uncovered. I heard her walking out of the bathroom, humming to herself like everything was fine. Like she hadn't just shattered my world without even knowing it. And that's when it hit me, I was done being the clueless husband. This wasn't something I could ignore or fix. There was no talking it out or pretending it didn't happen. My wife had betrayed me, and I was going to get to the bottom of it, no matter what it took. But first, I needed to figure out how to confront her. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind was going a million miles an hour, trying to wrap itself around what I had seen. The texts, the pictures, the betrayal, it all kept playing on a loop. How could Sarah do this to me? How long had I been living in this lie? But there was one thing I knew for sure, I wasn't going to let this slide. She came to bed like nothing was wrong, laying beside me with her back turned, scrolling on her phone again, probably texting him. I just stared at the ceiling, wondering how the hell my life had come to this. The anger was bubbling up, but I wasn't ready to confront her yet. Not until I had real proof. I wasn't about to let her weasel her way out with some bullshit excuse about it's not what it looks like or he's just a friend. No, this time, I needed to see it for myself. So, I waited. The next day, she left the house around 6 p.m., all dressed up again, wearing that perfume she hadn't used in years. She didn't say where she was going, just tossed a casual "I'm meeting some friends for dinner" over her shoulder as she grabbed her keys. I knew she was lying. Friends my ass. She was meeting him, Rob. And I was going to catch them in the act. I followed her. I never thought I'd be the kind of guy to do that, but desperate times, right? She had been hiding this affair for months, sneaking around behind my back, so I figured it was time I did a little sneaking myself. I stayed a few cars behind, watching as she made her way across town. She pulled into a parking lot next to some shitty motel. My stomach dropped. There it was. The proof I needed. She parked, and after a few minutes, I saw a car pull up next to hers. A guy stepped out. Even from a distance, I knew it had to be him, Rob. They didn't waste any time either. As soon as he got out, Sarah practically jumped into his arms, wrapping her legs around him like they were starring in some goddamn romance movie. And then they kissed. Not just a peck on the cheek, not some innocent goodbye. This was the kind of kiss you only give someone when you're completely lost in them. Passionate, full of hunger. It was like watching my entire world shatter in real time. I snapped. I don't even remember getting out of my car. 1 second I was sitting there, watching them, and the next, I was charging across the parking lot. My vision went red. They didn't see me coming until I was right on top of them. I grabbed Rob by the collar, yanking him away from her so fast he stumbled backward. "What the hell?" he started to say, but he didn't get a chance to finish. My fist connected with his jaw, the crack of bone against bone loud enough to echo across the lot. He hit the ground hard, barely catching himself with his hands. Sarah screamed. I barely registered it. My focus was locked on Rob. I couldn't believe this was the guy my wife had thrown everything away for. He wasn't even anything special, just some tall, scruffy asshole who thought he could steal someone else's wife and walk away unscathed. "You piece of shit!" I shouted, grabbing him by the shirt and pulling him up off the ground. His eyes were wide with fear, but I didn't care. I wasn't thinking. I wasn't trying to scare him, I wanted to hurt him. I wanted him to feel the pain that had been burning inside me since I first saw that message on Sarah's phone. I punched him again. And again. Each hit fueled by months of pent-up rage, by the humiliation of knowing I'd been played for a fool. Blood poured from his nose, splattering on the concrete, but I didn't stop. My knuckles were raw, but it wasn't enough. It would never be enough to erase the betrayal. "Jake, stop." Sarah's voice finally broke through. She grabbed my arm, pulling me back, her face twisted in a mix of fear and shock. "Please, stop," she cried, tears streaming down her face. I yanked my arm away from her. "Is this the guy, huh? This is who you've been screwing behind my back?" I was breathing hard, adrenaline coursing through me, my body trembling with fury. Rob was lying on the ground, groaning, barely able to lift his head. I wanted to go at him again, but Sarah was standing between us now, her hands up like she was trying to protect him. The sight of her defending him after everything made me sick. "Jake, it's not what you think," she started to say, but I cut her off. "Bullshit. I saw the texts. I saw the pictures. You've been cheating on me with this asshole for months." My voice cracked, the pain finally catching up to the anger. Sarah's face went pale, her mouth opening and closing like she was trying to come up with some kind of excuse. But there was no excuse. There was no way to explain this away. She was caught, red-handed, and we both knew it. "Please, Jake, Shut up," I snapped, my voice cold. I didn't want to hear it. I didn't care what she had to say anymore. "You've been lying to me, making a fool out of me, and for what? For him?" I pointed at Rob, who was still lying on the ground, groaning in pain. "I'm sorry," Sarah whispered, but it was too late for apologies. It was too late for anything. I took a step back, my hands still shaking, blood dripping from my knuckles. I wanted to hit him again, but what was the point? What was I even doing here? It wasn't going to fix anything. Beating him senseless wasn't going to undo the months of lies, wasn't going to make Sarah love me again. I turned away, unable to look at either of them any longer. "We're done," I said, my voice low, but firm. "You can have him." I walked back to my car, my body numb. I could hear Sarah crying behind me, calling my name, but I didn't stop. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. The woman I loved was gone, replaced by someone I didn't even recognize anymore. Someone who had betrayed me in the worst possible way. I sat in my car for a long time, staring at the steering wheel, trying to process what had just happened. But all I could feel was emptiness. I don't know how long I sat there in the car after beating Rob, but eventually, I drove home. The numbness didn't go away. In fact, it settled in deeper, taking root in my chest, making it hard to think straight. I felt like a part of me had shut down. My hands were still shaking, still covered in blood, some mine, some his, but I didn't care. I had caught them. I had seen the truth with my own eyes, and now there was nothing left but the fallout. When I got back to the house, it was dark and quiet. The kids were staying at my parents' place for the weekend, thankfully, because I had no idea how I was going to explain any of this to them. I didn't even know how to explain it to myself. My world had been ripped apart in a matter of minutes, and I was still trying to piece together what the hell I was going to do next. I barely had time to take off my shoes before I heard the front door open. Sarah had followed me home. Of course she had. The moment she stepped inside, I could feel the tension thick in the air, like a storm ready to break. She looked awful, her makeup was smeared, her eyes red from crying, and she hadn't bothered to change out of the dress she wore when she met him. We just stood there, staring at each other in silence for what felt like forever. Finally, I broke it. "So, what now?" I asked, my voice flat, empty. I didn't have the energy for anger anymore. I just wanted answers. I wanted to know why she did this. Why she tore our life apart for someone like Rob. Sarah didn't respond right away. She just stood there, biting her lip, tears brimming in her eyes again. "Jake, please." "I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice trembling. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this." "Oh yeah?" I said, feeling my hands ball into fists at my sides again. "How was it supposed to happen, Sarah?" "Huh?" Were you waiting for the perfect time to tell me you've been screwing some guy behind my back for months? Or were you just going to keep lying? It's not like that, she started, but I wasn't in the mood for her bullshit. Cut the crap, Sarah. I shouted, finally losing my cool. I saw the messages. I saw the pictures. You think I'm some kind of idiot? Do you know what it felt like to stand there and watch you kiss him like that? Like you've never kissed me before? She flinched at that. Good. I wanted her to feel the weight of what she'd done. I wanted her to understand the pain she had caused. But at the same time, I could see it in her eyes, there was a part of her that just didn't care. The same part of her that had chosen to be with Rob in the first place. I didn't mean for you to find out like this, she muttered, barely looking at me. It just happened. I was lonely, Jake. You were always working late, and Rob was there, he listened to me. I didn't think it would go this far. Lonely? I echoed, shaking my head in disbelief. That's your excuse? I was working my ass off to provide for us, and you're telling me that wasn't enough? That you needed some other guy to keep you company? My voice was trembling now, not with anger, but with disbelief. The woman I thought I knew had turned into a stranger, standing there in front of me, offering pathetic excuses for why she destroyed everything we had. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, sniffling, but I couldn't bring myself to feel sorry for her. It wasn't just about that, Jake, she said quietly. We've been drifting apart for a while. You haven't touched me in months. Don't even try that, I cut her off. You're blaming me for your cheating now? You've been sleeping with him for months, haven't you? Sarah hesitated for a moment, then nodded, looking down at the floor. Yes, I have, she whispered. I felt like I had been punched in the gut all over again. Hearing her admit it, hearing her confirm what I had already known, made everything so much more real. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to make her feel as broken as I felt. But instead, I just stood there, my fists clenched at my sides, my heart pounding in my chest. I gave you everything, I said, my voice barely more than a whisper. I gave you my life, and you threw it away for him. Sarah didn't say anything. She just stood there, her eyes wide and full of tears, like she didn't know how to fix the mess she had created. But I wasn't looking for her to fix it. There was nothing left to fix. I want you to pack your things and leave, I finally said, my voice cold and final. We're done. She blinked, like she hadn't expected me to say it, like she still thought there was some way out of this. Jake, please don't do this, she begged, stepping toward me. I know I screwed up, but we can work through this. I love you. I don't want to lose you. It's too late for that, I snapped, stepping back, putting space between us. You already lost me the moment you decided to cheat. This marriage is over. She started to cry harder now, her whole body shaking. Please, Jake, don't do this, she sobbed, reaching for me. But I pulled away. You should have thought about that before you got involved with him, I said, turning my back on her. I walked toward the kitchen, needing to put some distance between us before I said something I'd regret. But before I could make it to the other side of the room, there was a knock at the door. I froze, confused. It was nearly midnight, who the hell could that be? Another knock, this one louder. I turned to Sarah, and she looked just as confused as I was, her tear-streaked face full of dread. I opened the door, and there they were. 2 police officers, standing on my front porch, their hands resting on their belts. Good evening, sir, one of them said, his voice calm but serious. We received a call about a possible assault. My heart dropped. I knew exactly what this was about. Rob. That bastard must have called the cops after I beat the crap out of him. Sarah's face went pale, her eyes darting between me and the officers. Is there a problem here? The other officer asked, stepping forward slightly, his eyes scanning the room behind me. I could feel my stomach churning, a mixture of fear and anger swirling inside me. There was a misunderstanding, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Mind if we come in? The first officer asked. It wasn't really a question, though. He was already stepping past me, his partner following close behind. Sarah stepped back, wrapping her arms around herself, looking like a deer caught in headlights. "Please," she started, her voice shaking, "this isn't what it looks like." "We'll be the judge of that," the officer said, cutting her off. He looked at me, his expression neutral but firm. "Sir, we need to know what happened tonight." I swallowed hard, trying to keep my voice calm. I found out my wife's been cheating on me," I said, my throat tight. "I saw her with him, and things got out of hand." The officers exchanged a look. "Got out of hand how?" one of them asked, his hand moving toward the radio on his shoulder. "I hit him," I admitted, my voice hoarse. "A few times. He deserved it." The officer nodded slowly, writing something down on a notepad. "We're going to need you to come down to the station," he said. "We'll need to take a formal statement." Wait, Sarah interjected, stepping forward. "He's not dangerous. Please, you don't need to take him in." The officer raised an eyebrow at her. "Ma'am, we're just doing our job. We'll let the courts decide what's necessary." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. The next morning felt like a fog, thick and disorienting. After a night at the station, giving my statement, answering a million questions about why I'd beaten the guy senseless, they let me go with a warning. Lucky for me, Rob didn't want to press charges. I guess he didn't want to explain to the police that he was sleeping with another man's wife when he got his face rearranged. Still, it felt like a hollow victory. There was nothing lucky about any of this. When I got home, Sarah was there, sitting on the couch, looking miserable. We hadn't spoken much since the cops left, and I didn't have the energy to deal with her. Not yet. I walked straight past her, up to the shower, scrubbing away the smell of the station and the stink of betrayal that seemed to cling to my skin. Afterward, as I stood in the bathroom mirror, towel wrapped around my waist, I knew what needed to be done next. Her parents had to know. Her friends, too. They needed to hear the truth, not some half-assed version of events that made Sarah look like the victim. I was done protecting her from the consequences of her actions. She'd made her bed, and now it was time for everyone to see what kind of mess she'd created. I got dressed, took a deep breath, and walked downstairs. Sarah looked up at me as I entered the living room, her eyes swollen from crying, her face pale and drawn. "Jake," she started, but I held up my hand to stop her. "Don't," I said, my voice cold. "I'm not in the mood for any more of your apologies. We're past that." She flinched but didn't say anything else. She knew I was serious. "I'm going to call your parents," I said flatly. "They deserve to know what's been going on. And I'm going to tell our friends, too. I'm not keeping this between us anymore." Sarah's eyes widened in panic. "What?" "No, Jake, please don't do that," she pleaded, standing up from the couch. "You don't need to drag them into this. They're already in this, Sarah," I snapped. "They're going to find out sooner or later, and I'm not going to lie to them just to protect your reputation. You did this. You're going to face the consequences." She started to cry again, but I was past the point of feeling sorry for her. I grabbed my phone and stepped outside onto the back porch, where I could have some space away from her. The first call I made was to her parents. That one wasn't easy, but it had to be done. I'd always had a good relationship with them. They were kind people, good people. They treated me like a son, and they adored Sarah. Telling them their daughter had been cheating on me, and that our marriage was over, felt like ripping open a wound that hadn't even begun to heal. Her mother answered after a few rings, her familiar warm voice on the other end of the line. "Jake. How are you, sweetheart?" I swallowed hard, trying to keep my voice steady. "Hey, Joyce," I said quietly. "There's something we need to talk about. It's important." There was a pause. "What's going on? Is everything all right?" "No," I admitted, feeling the weight of the words settle in my chest. "It's not all right. Sarah and we're not okay." I could hear the concern in her voice, the motherly instinct kicking in. "What happened? Is Sarah all right?" She's fine physically, I said. But, there's no easy way to say this, so I'll just get it out. Sarah's been cheating on me. The line went dead silent. I could practically feel the shock radiating through the phone. Joyce had always been proud of her daughter, always bragging about how wonderful Sarah was. This news was going to crush her. Jake, are you sure? Joyce asked softly, her voice trembling. There must be some kind of mistake. I wish there was, I said, bitterness creeping into my tone. But there's no mistake. She's been seeing some guy for months. I caught them last night. It's over. There was a long silence on the other end of the line, and then I heard her start to cry. It hit me hard, hearing her sob like that. This was a woman who had always been strong, always so put together. But now she was falling apart, just like everything else around me. Oh my God. I can't believe it, Joyce whispered through her tears. I don't understand. Why would she do this? I don't understand it either, I said. But I wanted you to hear it from me, not from someone else. Thank you for telling us, she said, her voice broken. I don't know what to say. We love you, Jake. You're still our son, no matter what happens. I blinked back the tears that threatened to come. Thanks, Joyce. I appreciate that. She said she'd talk to Sarah and her husband, Bill, would be calling me later. That was going to be a fun conversation, but at least I knew I had done the right thing. There was no way I was going to hide this from them. Not after everything. After hanging up with Joyce, I called a few of our closest friends. That was even harder in some ways. They had been there from the beginning, supporting us through everything, the ups and downs, the fights and the reconciliations. But now, they were going to hear the truth about what Sarah had done. I started with Mike and his wife, Laura. They had been our friends for years, and we spent most weekends together, either at our place or theirs. I didn't want to drag them into the mess, but I knew I had to. They deserved to know what was going on, and I wasn't about to let Sarah spin her own version of the story. Hey, man, Mike said when he picked up. What's up? Haven't heard from you in a bit. Yeah, hey, Mike, I said, trying to find the words. Listen, I need to tell you something, and it's not going to be easy to hear. Okay, he said, sounding concerned. What's going on? Sarah's been cheating on me, I said bluntly, not wanting to drag it out. I found out last night. It's been going on for months. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When Mike finally spoke, his voice was filled with shock. What? Jake, man. I'm so sorry. I don't even know what to say. Yeah, neither do I admitted, feeling the exhaustion creeping into my bones. But I thought you should know. I'm not hiding this. She needs to face the consequences, and I'm not going to be the one keeping her secrets. Of course, man, Mike said. You know Laura and I have your back, whatever you need. Do you want to come over? Get away from the house for a bit? Thanks, I said, appreciating the offer. I might take you up on that soon, but right now, I've got to deal with the mess here. I get it, he said. But seriously, Jake, if you need anything, call us. You're like family to us. I hung up with Mike and repeated the same conversation with a few more of our friends. Each call was painful, each one a reminder of the life Sarah and I had built together and how it was unraveling at the seams. But every time, I felt a little bit lighter. It wasn't about revenge or making her look bad, it was about reclaiming my dignity. I wasn't going to let her get away with this without facing the consequences. By the time I was done making the calls, I felt like I had run a marathon. My head was pounding, my heart aching. But I knew it had to be done. People needed to know the truth. When I went back inside, Sarah was still sitting on the couch, staring blankly at the floor. She looked up as I entered, her eyes puffy and red. Did you tell them? She asked, her voice small, almost like a child's. Yes, I said bluntly. They all know. Your parents are friends. They know what you did. She didn't say anything, just nodded slowly, wiping at her eyes. The weight of everything seemed to settle over the room like a thick fog, suffocating and inescapable. Neither of us knew what to say next, and the silence stretched on, heavy and oppressive. Finally, I broke the silence. "You need to pack your things," I said, my voice tired. "I want you gone by tomorrow." Sarah looked at me, her eyes pleading. "Jake, please. Just go," I said, cutting her off. "There's nothing left to say. You've done enough." And with that, I walked away, leaving her alone in the living room. It was over. I never thought I'd be the kind of man to let something like this slide. You hear about guys going nuclear after finding out their wives cheated, destroying their stuff, beating up the guy who slept with her, or doing something stupid that ends with them in jail. I'd already had my moment of violence with Rob, and it hadn't done a damn thing to make me feel better. If anything, it just made the whole situation messier. He wasn't worth breaking my knuckles over. I wasn't about to go down that path again. But that didn't mean I was done with him. Sarah was gone. She'd packed up most of her things and left while I was out at work. No dramatic goodbye, no final plea to fix what was broken, just an empty closet and a note that said, "I'm sorry." Sorry didn't cut it. Not anymore. I'd already told her parents and our friends the truth, so there wasn't much left to say to her. As far as I was concerned, she could disappear with Rob for all I cared. But him? He wasn't getting off that easily. I knew where Rob worked. I'd done my research after the initial blow-up, and I knew he wasn't some stranger Sarah had stumbled upon by accident. He was a sleazy real estate agent, always boasting about his latest sale on social media. His face was plastered on every damn billboard on the highway, smiling like the smug piece of crap that he was. It made me sick. Every time I saw one of those billboards, it felt like a slap in the face, a constant reminder that he was still out there, still walking around like he hadn't ruined someone else's life. I wasn't going to let him get away with that. But I wasn't about to get myself into more legal trouble by confronting him physically again. No, this time I was going to hit him where it really hurt: his career, his reputation. If he wanted to screw up my life, then I was going to return the favor. I spent the next few days gathering as much information about Rob as I could. It wasn't hard, he had a public profile on just about every social media platform you could think of. Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. He wasn't shy about flaunting his success, posting pictures of himself with clients, showing off expensive houses, and attending networking events. It was all part of his image, the charming, successful businessman who could close any deal. But I knew the truth now. And I was going to make sure everyone else knew it too. The first step was to find out who his clients were. A quick search of his real estate office's website gave me a list of recent properties he'd sold. From there, it was easy to cross-reference the buyers with their profiles on LinkedIn and Facebook. These were people with money, people who probably didn't want to be associated with a guy who was screwing around with married women. I started by crafting an anonymous email, just a simple message, no threats, nothing too aggressive. It went something like this. Subject: information you may want to know about your realtor, Rob. Dear, client's name. I'm writing to you anonymously because I believe you deserve to know the kind of person you're doing business with. Rob, last name, has been involved in an extramarital affair with a married woman, leading to the breakdown of her marriage. I thought you should be aware of his personal conduct, as it may reflect on his professional behavior. Do with this information what you will. But I felt it was important for you to know. Sincerely, a concerned citizen. I sent that email to every client I could find who had recently done business with Rob. Some were CEOs, others were entrepreneurs, and a few were just regular people with enough cash to buy expensive homes. I didn't know if they'd care, but I figured at least a few of them would. People don't like doing business with scumbags, and even if just one client decided to drop him because of what I sent, it would hurt him. It was all about planting the seed of doubt. His reputation was everything in his line of work, and I wanted to watch it crumble. The next step was to go after his online presence. I knew he was active on a bunch of real estate forums and groups, where agents would share tips and strategies to close deals. So, I created fake profiles and joined those same groups. I posted subtle, anonymous messages questioning his ethics, saying things like, "Has anyone else heard rumors about Rob, last name? I heard he was involved in some shady stuff with a client's wife." The rumors spread quickly. People are nosy, especially in competitive fields like real estate. It didn't take long for the whispers to grow louder. A few days after I started, I saw comments on his Instagram posts, people asking if the rumors were true, if he really was involved in an affair. Rob tried to brush it off, but the more he ignored it, the worse it got. His clean-cut image was starting to tarnish, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. But I wasn't done yet. I knew that Sarah's phone was off limits now that she'd left, but I still had access to some of the photos and texts I discovered earlier. I didn't need her phone, I had the evidence I needed saved on my laptop. I wasn't about to use the explicit stuff. No, I wasn't that low. But I had enough suggestive messages and flirtatious pictures of them together to paint the picture I wanted. I created a blog, something simple and anonymous. I wrote out the whole story, the affair, the lies, the betrayal. I didn't use Sarah's name, didn't need to. The blog focused entirely on Rob, framing him as the sleazeball homewrecker that he was. I posted screenshots of their texts, blurred enough to protect Sarah's identity, but clear enough to show that Rob was the other man. It was a public forum for anyone to see, and I made sure it was easily searchable. Then, I shared the link anonymously across real estate forums, on social media, even emailing it to some of his competitors. I knew the kind of vultures that worked in his field, they'd be all over this, using it to tear him down and steal his clients. The real estate world is cutthroat, and Rob was about to find out just how brutal it could be when someone was out to ruin you. I didn't stop there. I posted reviews on every platform where his business was listed: Yelp, Google, Zillow. Every review was the same, a scathing critique of his professionalism, warning potential clients about his unethical behavior. I made sure to mention his personal life in a way that made it clear he couldn't be trusted, both as a realtor and as a person. I don't know how long it took for him to notice, but one day, while scrolling through one of the real estate forums, I saw a post from Rob himself. He was trying to do damage control, claiming that the rumors were false, that someone was trying to smear his name out of jealousy. He even hinted that he knew who was behind it all, which made me laugh. There was no way he could prove any of it, and he knew it. The more he tried to defend himself, the guiltier he looked. His business was taking a hit, and there wasn't a damn thing he could do about it. I didn't feel sorry for him. Not one bit. This wasn't about making him pay for sleeping with my wife, that was on Sarah, too. But Rob had inserted himself into my life, into my marriage, and now he was going to feel what it was like to have everything he'd built start to crumble around him. Maybe he could recover eventually, maybe he couldn't. But for now, I was content to watch him squirm. I wasn't going to lay my hands on him again. I wasn't going to scream or threaten or confront him face to face. I'd already done that, and it had gotten me nowhere. But this slow, calculated destruction of his reputation and his livelihood, this was revenge I could live with. By the end of the week, Rob's name was being dragged through the mud all over the internet. Clients were dropping him, competitors were circling like sharks, and he was scrambling to control the narrative. I sat back and watched it all unfold from the comfort of my home, feeling a sense of satisfaction that I hadn't felt in weeks. It wasn't the kind of revenge that movies are made of. There was no grand, explosive showdown, no dramatic conclusion. But it was enough. I'd taken back control in the only way I knew how, and now Rob would have to deal with the consequences of his choices, just like I had to deal with mine. A week after Sarah left, I got the call I'd been waiting for, but dreaded all the same. It was her. I hadn't heard much from her since she packed up and disappeared. She'd been staying with a friend, or maybe with Rob. I didn't care to ask. After everything that had happened, I wasn't interested in where she was or what she was doing. It was over. But there were things we still needed to deal with: the house, the finances, and most of all, the divorce. It was inevitable, like a slow-moving car crash that you see coming but can't avoid. Jake, her voice cracked over the line, tentative, as if she was afraid I'd hang up the second I heard it. "What is it, Sarah?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. There was no point in getting emotional now. We were past that. Everything I'd felt, anger, hurt, betrayal, had dulled to a cold, hollow acceptance. There was no saving this marriage, and I wasn't about to pretend otherwise. I think we need to talk. About everything, she said, her voice softer than I remembered. She sounded tired, like the weight of what she'd done was finally sinking in. Yeah, we do, I agreed. We need to figure out the divorce. There's no point dragging this out any longer. There was a long pause on her end, like she hadn't expected me to say it so bluntly. Maybe she thought I'd fight for her, or that I'd still want to fix things. Maybe she thought I was waiting for her to come to her senses and beg for forgiveness. But the truth was, I was done. I'd been done the moment I saw her with Rob in that parking lot, and nothing she said now was going to change that. Jake. I never wanted it to come to this, she said quietly, her voice trembling. I never meant to hurt you. I let out a bitter laugh before I could stop myself. You didn't mean to hurt me? Sarah, you've been sleeping with another guy for months. What the hell did you think was going to happen? I know, she said quickly, her voice breaking. I made a mistake. A huge mistake. But I wasn't trying to destroy us. I was just... I don't know. I was lost, Jake. I didn't know how to talk to you anymore. Everything felt so distant between us, and Rob, he was just there. I'm not trying to justify it, but I didn't mean for it to get this far. I shook my head, even though she couldn't see it. It got far enough, Sarah. You made your choices, and now we're here. So, what do you want from me? I don't know, she whispered, and I could hear the tears in her voice again. I don't want a divorce, Jake. I still love you. The words hung in the air, cold and empty. Once, they would have meant something. Hell, once, they would have been enough to make me fight for us. But not anymore. Love didn't excuse betrayal. Love didn't fix the months of lies and sneaking around. It didn't erase the image of her in Rob's arms or the memory of her messages flashing on her phone like a neon sign pointing to the end of our marriage. I don't love you anymore, Sarah, I said bluntly, and as the words left my mouth, I realized they were true. Whatever I had felt for her was gone, smothered by the weight of her betrayal. You killed that when you decided to cheat. She started to sob, but I couldn't bring myself to care. Not like I used to. I wasn't going to let her tears sway me anymore. I wasn't going to let her turn this around and make me feel like I was the one who had to fix things. Jake, please. I'm so sorry, she cried. I don't know why I did this. I don't want to lose you. We can go to counseling, we can work through this. No, I cut her off. We're not working through this. There's nothing left to work through. You want to know why we were distant? It's because you were already pulling away. You were already thinking about him. So don't try to blame this on me, and don't think for a second that we can patch this up. I'm done, Sarah. I want a divorce. The words were final, and they hit her hard. I could hear her struggling to breathe, choking on her sobs. But I didn't soften. I couldn't. If I let her in now, if I let her guilt sway me, I'd be stuck in this nightmare for the rest of my life. Please, Jake, she whispered, barely able to get the words out. I can change. I can fix this. No, you can't, I said, my voice flat. This isn't something you can just fix. You don't come back from this. Not for me. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. I could picture her sitting there, the realization finally sinking in. She had broken us, and there was no way to piece us back together. What about the house? She finally asked, her voice weak. We'll sell it, I said. Split the money. I'm not staying here, and neither are you. We'll find a lawyer to handle the rest. I don't want to fight over this. Let's just end it clean. Sarah let out a shaky breath. Okay. I'll call a lawyer tomorrow. Maybe we can. I've already got one, I interrupted, not wanting her to drag this out any more than necessary. You can use yours, and we'll go through mediation. I'm not looking to make this complicated. She didn't respond right away, and for a moment, I thought she might argue. But instead, she just let out another soft sob. All right, she whispered. Mediation. I'll figure it out. There wasn't much more to say. The decision had been made, and we were both just going through the motions now. I didn't want to be cruel, but I wasn't about to let her manipulate me into thinking there was a future for us. Not after everything. We talked briefly about the practicalities, the house, the shared accounts, the logistics of separating our lives after years of being intertwined. It felt mechanical, like we were dividing up the pieces of something that had already been dead for a long time. There was no fight, no passion, just resignation. She knew it was over, even if she didn't want to admit it. I'm sorry, she whispered again before we hung up, her voice breaking. For everything. Yeah, I said quietly. Me too. And with that, the call ended. I stood there for a long time, staring at my phone, feeling the finality of it all wash over me. It was strange. For so long, I had imagined what it would be like to confront Sarah, to make her understand the damage she'd caused. But now that the conversation had happened, now that the divorce was set in motion, I didn't feel triumphant or relieved. I just felt empty. This was the end of us. The end of the life we'd built together, the life I thought we'd have forever. And now, it was all gone, reduced to nothing but paperwork and phone calls with lawyers. I didn't know what the future held for me, but I knew one thing for certain: whatever it was, it didn't include her. The weeks that followed that last conversation with Sarah were a blur of legal documents, meetings with lawyers, and endless emails about splitting assets. It felt surreal, like I was watching it all happen from a distance, detached from the life I had spent years building. But the truth was, the divorce process wasn't the hardest part. The hardest part was facing the reality that the woman I thought I'd spend my life with was no longer a part of it. Mediation meetings were awkward, tense, and painfully clinical. Sarah and I sat across from each other, our lawyers acting as buffers, as we went through the motions of untangling our lives. The first meeting was particularly rough. Sarah looked worn down, her face pale, her eyes avoiding mine. She seemed smaller somehow, like the weight of everything had finally taken its toll on her. But I didn't let myself feel bad for her. Not anymore. We'd both agreed to sell the house, and as much as it hurt to let go of the place where we had so many memories, it felt like the only way to really move on. Every corner of that house held a piece of the life we used to have, the good times and the bad. But I didn't want to live in a museum of my failed marriage. It had to go, just like everything else we'd built together. The financial stuff wasn't that complicated. We didn't have kids, so there was no custody battle to deal with. Just the house, the savings, and a few joint investments. We'd been a team once, and splitting everything down the middle felt like a formality. We were both eager to make the process as quick and painless as possible, but even then, it still felt like pulling teeth. Sitting in that mediation room, listening to lawyers talk about property value and dividing retirement accounts, was like watching a life being dissected piece by piece. The reality of it hit hard during one of the meetings, when Sarah's lawyer was explaining the sale of the house. I zoned out, staring at her across the table, remembering all the times we had walked through the front door together, laughing or fighting or just being us. And now, here we were, breaking it all apart like it never meant a damn thing. We had one final meeting at the lawyer's office to finalize everything. Sarah sat on one side of the table, her lawyer beside her, and I sat on the other, trying not to let the weight of the situation drag me under. We signed the papers in silence, the only sounds in the room the scratching of pens and the shuffle of documents being passed back and forth. When it was over, the lawyer looked up and said, "That's it. The divorce is finalized. You're both free to go." Free to go. The words hung in the air like a heavy cloud. I had been waiting for this moment, for the end, and now that it was here, I wasn't sure how to feel. There was no relief, no sense of victory. Just emptiness. Sarah didn't leave right away. She lingered, looking like she wanted to say something, but the words were stuck in her throat. I stood up, grabbed my coat, and started to head for the door. Jake, she called out, her voice soft and fragile, like she was afraid I wouldn't stop. I turned around, waiting for her to say whatever it was she needed to get off her chest. I just want you to know that I'm really sorry. For everything. I know you don't believe me, and I don't expect you to forgive me, but I need you to know that I never meant for it to end like this. I stood there, taking in her words, feeling nothing but a hollow ache in my chest. We had both been through hell, and yet, there was no going back. I had nothing left to say to her. The apology felt like it was too little, too late. I'd heard it all before, and it didn't change anything. I know, I said quietly, but my voice carried no warmth. I wasn't trying to be cruel, but I wasn't going to give her a pass, either. Take care of yourself, Sarah. And with that, I turned and walked out of the room, leaving her behind for good. The house sold faster than I expected. It was strange packing up my things, knowing I wouldn't be coming back. I didn't take much, just the essentials and a few personal items that mattered to me. Everything else was either sold or left behind. The walls that once held the laughter and tears of our marriage now echoed with emptiness. I moved into a small apartment across town. It wasn't much, but it was mine. The first night I spent there was quiet, too quiet, in fact. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering how the hell I ended up here. I used to have a wife, a home, a future that I thought was solid. Now, it was just me, alone in a one-bedroom apartment, starting over at 40. But as the days went by, I started to get used to it. Slowly, I began rebuilding. I threw myself into work, focusing on the projects that had been neglected while my personal life was falling apart. It felt good to be busy, to have something to distract me from the chaos of the past few months. Every once in a while, I'd get a call from a friend asking how I was holding up, offering to meet for drinks or catch a game. I appreciated the support, but I wasn't ready to dive back into socializing. I needed time to figure out who I was without Sarah, without the life we'd built together. I wasn't the same person I had been before the affair, and I wasn't sure who I was supposed to be now. Eventually, I started going out more. I reconnected with friends I hadn't seen in a while, went out for the occasional drink, even joined a local gym to keep myself busy. It wasn't about moving on or pretending everything was fine, it was about finding a way to live again. To build something new out of the wreckage. One day, while I was scrolling through old photos on my phone, I stumbled across a picture of Sarah and me from a trip we'd taken years ago. We were smiling, our arms wrapped around each other, the sun setting behind us. I stared at it for a long time, feeling a mix of nostalgia and sadness. That version of us, the happy, carefree couple who thought they had the world at their feet, was gone. But as I looked at the photo, I realized something: I didn't hate her anymore. I wasn't angry, I wasn't bitter. I was just done. I deleted the photo and set my phone down. It was time to let go, once and for all. The divorce had been brutal, but in the end, it was a relief. It was the clean break I needed to move on. Sarah and I hadn't spoken since that last meeting at the lawyer's office, and I didn't plan on reaching out. She was a chapter in my life that was over now, and I had to accept that. Looking back, I realized that I'd spent so much time trying to hold on to something that had been broken for a long time. Sarah's affair had shattered the illusion I had of our marriage, but the cracks had been there long before. It took the betrayal to open my eyes and see it for what it really was. In the end, the divorce wasn't just the end of my marriage, it was the beginning of something new. Something that was mine alone. And as hard as it had been, as painful as the process was, I knew that I was finally free. Free to start over. Free to rebuild. Free to move on.